I am Joseph, and this is my story. The linen of my robe is finer than anything my brothers have ever touched, and still, some mornings, when the palace is quiet and the Nile mist clings low over the reeds, I close my eyes and I am 17 again, standing at the bottom of a dry cistern, staring up at circles of my brothers' faces, waiting for one of them to show mercy. None of them did. Not that day. I remember the smell of that pit, wet stone, old rope, the metallic tang of my own fear. I remember Reuben's voice cracking as he argued for my life, and Judah's voice, flatter, more practical, suggesting they sell me instead of killing me, as if that were kindness. I remember the Ishmaelite traders counting out 20 pieces of silver into my brother's hands while I was still close enough to hear the coins clink. 20 pieces. That was the price they set on me, their father's favored son, the boy in the coat of many colors, the dreamer. I had dreamed of sheaves bowing down, of sun and moon and 11 stars bowing to me. I did not understand then that dreams from God are not given so we can boast. I only knew I loved my father and did not understand why my brother's eyes turned to stone whenever he called my name with more warmth than theirs. I did not know, chained in an Egyptian slave caravan, coughing on desert dust, weeping until I had no more tears, I did not know that God was not absent. I only felt absent. I remember praying into that silence and hearing nothing back, and wondering if the God of my father, Jacob, the God of Abraham and Isaac, had simply looked away from me the way my brothers had. I did not yet understand what I would only understand decades later, standing in a palace built on a river my ancestors never dreamed of. God is never absent. He is only, sometimes, quiet, working beneath the surface of our suffering, the way the Nile works beneath its own flood plain, invisible, patient, faithful. Potiphar's house and the pit beneath the pit. You may think the cistern was my lowest moment. It was not. My lowest moment came years later in Potiphar's house, when I had finally begun to trust again, trusted my own integrity, trusted that if I served faithfully and kept myself pure before God, surely blessing would follow. I remember the weight of Potiphar's wife's hand on my sleeve, the perfume in that room, thick as smoke. I remember running from sin the way I should have run from the pit, and finding myself, for my faithfulness, thrown into a deeper pit still, an Egyptian prison, forgotten for 2 more years. I wept in that prison too. I will not pretend I did not. There were nights I lay on the stone floor and asked God the same question every suffering man has ever asked. Why do the innocent still suffer? Why does obedience not always look like reward? But something had shifted in me since the cistern. I had stopped waiting for God to explain himself, and started simply obeying him inside whatever room he put me in, slave's house or prison cell. I interpreted dreams there for a cupbearer and a baker, and asked only one thing of the man who was freed. Remember me. He forgot. 2 more years passed before Pharaoh's own dreams, fat cows and thin, full grain and withered, dragged my name up out of that forgotten cell. I stood before Pharaoh in borrowed linen, my beard shaved in the Egyptian custom, and gave God the glory before I gave the interpretation. It is not in me. God will give Pharaoh a favorable answer. I said that as a slave, a prisoner, a foreigner with nothing left to lose. And by that evening I wore Pharaoh's own signet ring. I tell you this, so you understand what happened afterward was not the triumph of a man's cleverness. It was the patient completion of a story God had been writing since a boy stood at the bottom of a well in Canaan and could not see past the walls of his own pit. The brothers return. 7 years of plenty came, as I had said they would, and I stored grain in cities until we stopped counting, like sand of the sea. Then the famine came, exactly as God had shown me, and it was not only Egypt that starved. It reached into Canaan too, into my father's tents, into the mouths of the brothers who had sold me. The day they walked into my grain hall, I knew them before they knew me. 10 men, dust-covered, bowing their faces to the ground before the Egyptian governor, exactly as my dream had shown so many years before, sheaves bowing down. I do not think my knees could have held me if I had not gripped the arm of my throne. I will confess something to you now that shames me a little, though I have made my peace with it. I tested them. I spoke to them through an interpreter, though I understood every word of their frightened Hebrew, as they murmured to each other, not knowing I could hear. I accused them of spying. I held Simeon as a hostage. I demanded they bring my younger brother Benjamin, my mother Rachel's other son, the only full brother I had, down to Egypt. I was not being cruel for cruelty's sake, though I understand if it looked that way. I needed to know something no interpreter could tell me. Had these men changed? 20 years is a long time. Would they abandon Benjamin the way they abandoned me, if it cost them nothing but a lie to our father? I overheard them, that first visit, standing near my grain stores, not knowing the governor beside them understood Hebrew. Reuben said it plainly. Did I not tell you not to sin against the boy? But you would not listen. Now comes the reckoning for his blood. I turned away from them so quickly that I nearly ran from the room. I found a private chamber, and I wept, the first of many times I would weep before this story ended. 20 years, and they still remembered. 20 years, and the guilt had never left them either. The final test. When they returned with Benjamin, my heart nearly broke through my chest at the sight of him. My mother's son, grown into a man, standing where I had stood, bowing where I had bowed. I had to leave the room again, find a quiet place, and wash my face before I could return and act as though I were still a stranger to them. I set the final test carefully, my silver cup hidden in Benjamin's sack, the accusation of theft, the demand that he alone remain behind as my slave while the others returned free to our father. I needed to see what they would do when the cost was real. Would they leave him as they had left me? Judah stepped forward. I will never forget his voice in that moment, not flat and practical as it had been at the pit, but broken, urgent, willing to lay down his own freedom. He told me of our father, of how Jacob's soul was bound up in the boy's life, of how our father had already lost one son he believed torn apart by wild animals and could not survive losing another. Judah offered himself. Let your servant remain instead of the boy, as a slave to my Lord, and let the boy go back with his brothers. For how can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? I fear seeing the evil that would come upon my father. That was the moment, not the silver cup, not the accusation, not even seeing Benjamin's face again after 20 years. It was hearing Judah who once said, "Let's sell him. What profit is there in killing him? Offer his own life for our father's sake and our brother's freedom." Something in my chest simply gave way. I could not restrain myself. I ordered every Egyptian attendant out of the room. I did not want witnesses to what was coming because I did not yet know myself what shape it would take. And when the doors closed, and it was only 12 sons of Israel standing in that chamber, I could not restrain myself any longer. I wept aloud, so loudly that the Egyptians heard it through the walls, and word of it reached even Pharaoh's own house. "I am Joseph," I said. "Does my father still live?" They could not answer me. I watched their faces, not confusion, but terror, the particular terror of men suddenly face to face with a sin they thought was buried in a pit 20 years deep. They stood there dismayed, unable to speak, and I understood in that instant that my next words would either crush them or set every one of us free. "Come near to me, please," I said, and I remember how strange my own voice sounded, thick with tears, gentle in a way I had not planned. They came closer, and I told them, plainly so there could be no mistake, "I am Joseph your brother, whom you sold into Egypt." I saw shame settle over them like dust, and I understood, in that moment, that if I let that shame stand unanswered, I would only be trading one kind of pit for another, trading their guilt for my forgiveness, keeping them beneath me forever. That was not what I wanted. That was not what God had done for me. So I told them the truth as I had come to understand it through every pit, every prison, every silent year. "Do not be grieved or angry with yourselves that you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life." So, it was not you who sent me here, but God. I meant every word. Not as a way of excusing what they did. It was sin, real sin, and it had cost me years of my life and my youth and my innocence. But somewhere between the bottom of that cistern and this room full of golden grain, I had learned that God does not merely permit evil to happen to his children. He works through it, beneath it, around it, until the very thing meant to destroy becomes the thing that saves. Judah had once sold me for silver to save his own conscience. Now, Judah had offered his own freedom to save his brother. God had not only preserved my life in Egypt, he had been working quietly, patiently, on 11 other hearts in Canaan the whole time. I fell on Benjamin's neck and wept, and he wept on mine. Then I kissed all my brothers and wept over them, and only after that were they able to speak with me. 20 years of silence broken by tears, none of us tried to hide. What I learned. I sent them back for my father with wagons full of Egypt's best, and when I finally embraced Jacob's neck again, an old man now, I wept a long time, as if I were trying to weep out every year the pit had stolen. People ask me sometimes, even now, how I could forgive so completely, how a man sold into slavery by his own family could stand before them with an open hand instead of a closed fist. I tell them what I have come to know as surely as I know my own name. Forgiveness was never mine to withhold, because the harm done to me was never the end of God's story for me. What my brothers meant for evil, God meant for good, to bring about the saving of many lives. I do not say the pit did not hurt. I do not say the prison years were not real years, stolen and grieved. But I say this: bitterness would have kept me in that pit forever, long after my body had climbed out of it. Forgiveness was the only way I ever truly left. If you are in a pit today, betrayed, forgotten, wronged by people who should have loved you, I want you to hear what took me 20 years to learn. God is not absent in your silence. He is working beneath it. And when the moment comes to forgive, you will not lose anything by opening your hand. You will finally be free. If you have been blessed by this story, subscribe, like, and share it with a friend.